Hello, and welcome back to The Path. Today my guest is Ed Sumner Sensei from the USA. He's a Jundokan practitioner. While his early days he trained in many other things, he finally found his true sensei in Chinen Sensei from the Jundokan. In this episode, we talk about his training, as well as Chinen Sensei's philosophies about training and how he conducted training. Also about physical fitness, as well as traditional Hojo Undo and modern weight training. I quite enjoyed talking to Ed Sensei, and I hope we can repeat it at some point. So, without further ado, let's get into the interview. Well, Ed Sumner Sensei, thank you very much for agreeing to being on the podcast. And for people who might not know who you are, could you perhaps give us a rundown of your training history? Or
Certainly. I joined the military at 17, right out of high school, and wound up in San Angelo, Texas, going to technical school there. And it was a 9-month-long program. And I had been fascinated by the martial arts for years, from seeing things on television and so forth. And so I found out that they had a judo program at Goodfellow Air Force Base. I immediately signed up for it and dove headlong into it and loved it. I was in it about 6 months when another beginner started. And as it turns out, he was exactly my size and shape. He was about 6'2", and at the time I was about 165. And this guy matched up with me very well. So, of course, he became my partner in training exercises and proceeded to just kick my fanny all over the dojo. I couldn't stand up with him. It was just amazing. So I asked him, so did you do high school wrestling? And he goes, no. I said, have you done judo before? No. Well, about a week later, I came to practice early, and I walk in the dojo, and there he is wearing a different kind of gi with a black belt around it, doing some strange things called kata. And I found out he'd just come from Okinawa with a shodan in Shorin-ryu, if I'm not mistaken. And so I just bugged the hell out of him until he started teaching me some standing basics and some moving basics. And that was about all I learned there. I continued with the judo until I got shipped out and got sent overseas. I got sent to the Philippines, and the first thing I did was I went and found a dojo. And I was more interested in karate at that time than in the judo, because being tall and skinny, the stand-up work seemed more appropriate to my body type. And at the dojo I was training at, which was called the Crosswinds Dojo, the teacher there, whose name was Marcelo Umipeg, did not have the strongest karate, I would find later, but he was an incredibly wise gentleman and very adept at helping young adolescent males get their heads together and get their lives in order. And he did that for me as well as most of the other guys that trained there. But he had attracted a student who had come from Okinawa with his black belt in Okinawan goju-ryu. That fellow's name is Jim Botsford. And Jim and I became like older brother, little brother, me being the little brother. And he sort of took me under his wing, and we wound up sometimes training 6 hours a day together, 6 days a week, sometimes 7. And that included a lot of koteki tai, meaning beating the hell out of my arms. And for the first 12 weeks or so, I was afraid he was going to kill me just by beating my arms. But after 12 weeks, my arms stopped hurting completely, and they actually started to feel good when they got hit. And we did the same thing with shins and ribs and stomach and all that sort of thing. So I got tough very fast. I didn't get skillful very fast, but I got tough. And Jim gave me that present of toughness training, if you will. He also kind of directed me to, if you ever get a chance, you should go to Okinawa and meet the teacher I trained with there. And that was Sensei Katsuyoshi Kane, who's since deceased. He had founded the Jinbukan Dojo. He was a student of Taguchi and came out of the Shureikan Dojo. And I did go to Okinawa. I did start training with Sensei Kane. Wonderful gentleman, very kind, not a particularly hard class, but a tough class. Koteki tai for an hour and then beat each other up for an hour. It was very hard training, but not so much calisthenic hard, although there was some of that, but just some really tough guys training there. And that I found to be useful as well. And so in any case, when I came home as a Nidan in goju-ryu. Spent about 2 weeks at home and realized, because I had also had a stint in Vietnam during that period of time, 18 months in Vietnam. And Jim Bosford, my senpai, and I were the two base instructors at Tan Son Nhut. And when I was away from the base doing my TDY duty, Jim would run the class. If I came back and he went to do TDY, I'd run the class. And we sort of traded off like that for the full 18 months we were there. Excuse me. So in any case, my Vietnam experience left me with a certain amount of, let's just say I was not a happy guy at that time.
Yeah.
And I decided I'd better go back overseas as a civilian. And fortunately, I'd saved a pile of money while I was in Vietnam. They had a 10% interest deal, and I didn't need to live on much. So I had some cash with which to travel. So I went back to the Philippines as a civilian, because I was afraid, frankly, the next person who called me a baby killer might get hurt. And so I went back to the Philippines. And this instructor I was telling you about, who was very wise, gave me some tremendous help in terms of controlling anger. He observed that I was a different person than when I trained with him before I went to Vietnam. And one night after practice, he said, "Ed, I want you to stay after practice for a little while." I said, "Oh, sure, Sensei." So he sat me down and he said, "You've become a very angry young man." And at first I denied it. No, I'm fine. Everything's okay. He said, "Oh, wait a minute. When I have you start sparring with someone at your level or below, and they manage to hit you in the face, what happens?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to tolerate that. Of course I'm going to go after him. That's not going to happen, right?" And he says, "Now think for a second. What happens when you do that?" Went, "Oh, well, you tell us to stop. You make that guy sit down, and you bring up the most senior guy you've got, and he proceeds to kick my butt all over the dojo for a half hour." And it was sort of like the light bulb was starting to go on, right? And he says, "So, how is your anger serving you?" Now that's a hell of a question. And I had to come to the conclusion that it wasn't serving me very well. And so he started counseling me on how to get control over that, how to not let someone else's behavior affect how I felt, which is wonderful advice when you think about it. So I started really working hard at getting good at that, and I think I finally accomplished that pretty well, well enough to come back to the States and be able to blend back in and get on with my life. So in any case, once I got back here, I started college on the GI Bill and ran into a fellow named Ernie Brennicke at a tournament in Portland. Ernie wasn't fighting that day because he had his arm in a sling. But he told me about Mr. Chinen and told me about a tournament that was going to happen at Washington State University and suggested I take my team there, because I was teaching a class there at Walla Walla, Washington at the time. So I did that, and I met Mr. Chinen. Now, to paint a little bit of a picture for you, understand that I was used to seeing these guys in Okinawa who were awe-inspiring martial artists, just strong, tough, fast guys. And then when I watched Sensei Chinen put on demonstration, I realized that he was doing things that I'd never seen any of them do, like off the charts better. And so I went to him. I said, "May I become your student?" And he said, "Yes." So I moved to Spokane to train with him. And he was my teacher until he passed away in 2015. So we had a very close relationship. He was a very unique individual. I mentioned his book to you. And if you get a chance to read it, you'll find out some of the chapters that are autobiographical in there about him. Some of the things that formed him and shaped him into the extraordinarily disciplined person he was. The first person he held to the high standards of discipline was himself. He had a work ethic for everything he did that was just off the charts. Push himself beyond any measure of common sense. But he in turn pushed his students the same way and expected us to step up and make it. And he was not the easiest guy to train with. And he lost a lot of good students over the years because they just couldn't quite handle being yelled at, being told, "Go to the corner, do 1,000 knuckle push-ups," and so on and so on. Fairly early on. In fact, I take some pride, sort of perverse pride, and to the best of my knowledge, being the first human being he ever used these words with. Go to corner, 1,000 knuckle push-ups. I'd made a silly mistake, and that was my punishment. The rest of that story, though, is as I went to the corner to do my 1,000 push-ups, I bowed, said yes sensei, and started the corner. But inside my head, it wasn't yes sensei. It was, this is embarrassing. How dare he do this? That's terrible. I can't believe he's doing this. Or, all this negativity. So I started doing the push-ups, and I think I hit push-up 12 or so when my head changed. I went, whoop, oh, wait a minute. He's not doing this to you. You're here because you want to be as good at this as your brain and body will let you be, and he's trying to push you towards that. He's doing this for you. Now, the weird part of that story is, and I don't believe in mind reading. I don't believe in that kind of nonsense. But maybe it was body language. But the exact moment that thought went through my head, he yelled over at me and said, "That's Sumner, it's enough. Get back in line." I think I did maybe 12 push-ups out of the 1,000. But that's the kind of disciplinarian he was. Very strict, very on top of everything. Just, almost brutal. If you didn't understand what was being given to you, if you didn't understand that it was for you and not against you, it would be hard to do. But I figured out early on, he's trying to push me up this hill. He's trying to make me get as good at this as my brain and body will let me be. And it was good. That's why I stuck with it for as long as I did, because I always saw benefits out of it. I always saw myself getting better and better and better and better. Sometimes it would take a long time before you'd see it, but then boing, oh, there it is. I got it now. And those little aha moments would really make it worthwhile.
So for people who might not know who Chinen Sensei is or was, could you give us a little bit of a background on him? Or
Yes. Sensei Chinen, I'll give a fairly shortened biography that you'd see in the book. But when he was still a very young boy, his father, at the very end of World War II, was on a ship, a Japanese ship, military ship. And they received orders to come back to their home port because the war was over and Japan had surrendered. So the captain of the ship assembled all of the men on deck and explained to them what had happened. And they decided, without a single dissenting vote, that rather than surrender and go back to home port, they were going to scuttle the ship and go down with it. And that's what happened to his father. And the way he knew that was that 4 or 5 years after the war, a monk came to his home and asked to speak with Mrs. Chinen. And he had been one of the shipmates who had been rescued by the Americans shortly after the boat went down. And he told her that story. And Sensei was in the room listening to that. He was maybe 8 at the time. It wasn't terribly long after that he lost his mother. So he wound up being essentially an orphan. But he started training in karate by that time. He lived 3 doors down from Choji Miyagi's garden dojo. And as a little kid, he'd be up stealing fruit from one of the fruit trees in Miyagi's backyard and kind of see what was going on back there. He was never Miyagi's student, but he was close enough to watch and observe and be fascinated by it and interested by it. So in any case, he became a Eiichi Miyasato student, and Miyasato Sensei started the Jundokan there in Naha. And he became, I'm trying to think of the word for it, Ushideshi, the errand boy, do whatever needed to be done. And for all intents and purposes, Miyasato sort of adopted him, not formally, but took care of him, made sure he was okay, gave him stuff to do, gave him some money for doing it. It kind of kept him out of trouble. And so karate became Sensei's life, just from a very early age. And I wrote something on Facebook not long ago about what is a master, because we have these people tossing around great grandmaster, grandmaster, master, etc., titles all the time. And I was thinking about it. I did a seminar for some folks not too long ago, and they referred to me as Master Sumner. No, that's not me. Long-term practitioner, yes. Call me sensei if I'm teaching you, but I'm not a master. Because as I see it, my view, A master combines at least three things. Number one, incredible natural gifted athletic talent. Okay, they have that as a base. Number two is a work ethic from the gods. I mean, whenever one else quits at 100 push-ups, they're trying for 200. Number three, a really great coach to guide them from early days. Okay, well, Sensei Chinen had all three of those. His senpai, you may know the name, Morio Higona, also had those in spades. And the two of them were very, very close for the longest time. When Higona Sensei went to Tokyo to teach at the Yogi Dojo, Chinen Sensei went with him. Okay? Now, until that point, he'd only worn a white belt. As he was getting ready to leave, Miyasato says, "Here, wear this when you go to Tokyo." He gave him his black belt. No test, no certificate, none of those kinds of things. Okay? In any case, he worked with Higona Sensei for quite a few years at the Yogi Dojo. His primary responsibility was teaching the gaijin, the foreigners. And then Miyasato decided that he should come here to this country because he'd started learning some English and he was teaching foreigners. And this was a good way to spread goju-ryu. So in 1970, Sensei Chinen came to Spokane, Washington. There was a small class started there by Ernie Brennicke, who had been one of the Yogi Dojo students. And Sensei took over that class, and as they say, the rest is history, so to speak.
I was never aware of how he moved from Okinawa to America. That's an interesting bit of information there. So, what would you do in a typical class when you were training in Washington with Chinen Sensei?
Well, there's one of the fascinating things about Sensei to me, and I try to emulate him in my teaching. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a little cold, so I sound funky. I'd almost go so far as to say there would be no such thing as a typical class. Sensei mixed it up, had you busy doing this and that and the other thing constantly. We might spend 6 months. You go in and do lots of calisthenics. You get your gi completely soaking wet, and then you start doing moving basics for free sparring. And after you did a lot of moving basics for free sparring, then you do randori, and then after randori, you do jiu-kumite with him as a referee, counting points. And that might be what you did for months. You never see a kata, right? Then you'd go to a tournament, and you'd say, okay, everyone did well. Next practice, you wouldn't do any randori, no jiu-kumite stuff at all. It would be kata, 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 kata. And he could make you sweat really hard doing just kata too. Always calisthenics, always kigo undo, fujo undo, supplemental training is another way of saying it. A lot of makawara work. We would do a lot of work with 5-pound weights in our hands, punch, 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 punch with 5-pound weights, put them down, see if you were a little faster. Really hard athletic training, and all of it specific to making you better at what you were doing in terms of your karate. We had some interesting traditions. The first time there was a good snow on the ground, we would warm up, do our normal bow in, warm up a little bit, go out the front door and run up the hill for a mile and run up and down stairs, and then run back to the dojo with frozen feet. And so that was always kind of an interesting night in training. But to kind of give you a little fuller picture, the Sensei was a gardener. One time we asked him, "Sensei, what's your favorite Kigo Undo implement?" And he goes, "Oh, I'll show you." And he goes around the corner and comes back with a shovel because he used the shovel for all of his gardening. And it was very common for us, the senior people, on a Saturday or Sunday to just show up at his house, go out in the backyard with him, move rocks, plant things, and then, let's do pachurin. And we'd do pachurin for an hour and a half. And back to moving some rocks. And it's, let me fix you lunch. And we'd eat lunch and back to moving some rocks. And it was just a joyful thing to just spend time with him. And worked really hard, but, just good fellowship. And another little story I'll share with you. One day, Steve Mitchell, Bruce McDavis and myself were at Sensei's house on a Saturday afternoon. We've been working in the backyard and, helping him with this and helping him with that. And then he'd do kata with us and fix things, no, put your hand here, that sort of stuff. And they said, okay, let me fix some lunch. We'll have lunch. Now, Steve and Bruce and I all tested for Sandan at the same time, along with a fellow named Dean Reynolds. Dean just didn't happen to be there that day. So as we're eating lunch, we're kind of just talking with him and visiting. And one of us asked him, Sensei, what was your training like when you were a young guy, when you were coming up at the dojo? He said, oh, well, sometimes Higo and I would get to the dojo early and we'd jump rope for 30 minutes to warm up. And we went, jump rope for 30 minutes? Oh my God, we could never do that. That's incredible. Wow, 30 minutes of jumping rope. Whoa. And he didn't say anything. We went on with our conversation. 2 weeks later, the three of us happened to show up at dojo about 20 minutes early. And Sensei comes over and says, Bruce, Steve, Ed, go get jump rope, 10 minutes. So we get there, we're jumping rope. There's a clock up in front of us, and we're watching the hands move. Gets to 9 minutes and 55 seconds, and he comes up and he goes, oh, good, 10 more minutes. Oh, God, okay, 10 more minutes. We get to 19 minutes and 55 seconds, and he comes up, good, 10 more minutes. Well, long story short, we wound up doing 30 minutes of jump rope before practice to warm up. So he was always, whatever glass ceiling you had in your brain about what you could do or couldn't do, he was always breaking that. Always push you up there and go, make that go away. And you go, oh, I can do 30 minutes jump. It was like, that was his modus operandi all the time. He was always finding little ways to get inside your head and push you upwards.
I think even the Jundokan today is actually kind of famous for, they seem to have a sort of a freer sort of structure when they're teaching. People tend to do their own things, but
It's always been that way.
Yeah.
Sensei would tell us about when he was a youngster coming up. There was one man who would come in, bow, go straight to the makawara, and start hitting the makawara with ko'uke, right? Over and over and over and over. Oh, this way, maybe you can see this. You weren't seeing that before, right? And he would do 15, 20 minutes on each hand, bow, and walk out. That was his own total practice for as long as Sensei knew it. That was it. Sensei thought, well, he could probably kill you with that technique, but that's all he's got, But yeah, it would be, you go do what you wanted to do. Maybe a senpai would grab you and say, Chinen, come over here. I'm going to do this and do that. But one of the things I thought was interesting, he talked about how a senpai might grab him and say, come over here and work a technique, two person. Okay, you punch, I'll do this. Okay, now that you've done it 5 times, I'll do it, the punch, you do that. And he said, then months would go by, and Miyasato would start to teach him a kata, and he'd go, oh, I know what that is already, because it had been part of what the senpai was working through. I thought that was sort of an interesting learning environment as well. But back in that time, they didn't allow free sparring. That was a no-no, no free sparring. Now, something else I wasn't a witness to, but since they shared this story with me, and you know how politics and karate are like. I mean, I'm sure you've got 50 people who said, no, that didn't happen. But this is what he told me, so I'll just share what he told me. And he went to Tokyo and was training with Higo Ono Sensei. One of their most fun things they would do together is go to other dojos, the Shotokan dojo, the Shito-ryu dojo, the Wado-ryu dojo, and fight with all the guys there. And not like, mean-spirited fighting, but just for fun. They were all buddies. So they'd fight like crazy and then go have beer. And he said, that's what pushed them up the hill in terms of learning timing and distancing and how to train as a tournament fighter. So a lot of the techniques that we would practice in class, you would never see in the Jundokan, ever. Okay? Because they didn't teach free sparring. They didn't allow free sparring. So it was like, that's why it, to me, looked like another big step up. I saw Sensei doing what he was doing. He had taken all the stuff from a variety of other styles and other schools and packaged it into his goju-ryu, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty rare that I don't know very many dojos on Okinawa that actually teach free sparring very regularly, even today.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
My dojo, we never do free sparring.
And my, just to share with you, my attitude, and this, as Sensei aged, this became his attitude as well. I think when he was kind of young and he had some ambitions about becoming a nationally known AAU karate guy and so forth, which he did. But I think after he got past a certain age, he realized that tournament sparring was not the be all and end all. If you go back to the Okinawan basic concepts, how do you save your life? How do you defend your life? And throwing a punch and waving your hand around because you think you got a point is not it. Right? So he kind of went back away from the tournament style of fighting. And if you wanted to do it, he would train you for it and encourage you and so forth. But the training at the dojo was more, okay, we're going to learn how this kata helps you win a fight. And we're going to teach you the bunkai oya that's going to help you succeed. And he would pressure test. I mean, you're doing a particular technique or two from the kata, and he would have you pressure test that, where, in other words, you get an uke who's not cooperating, right? Who's doing his best to put you on the ground instead of the other way around. And the result of that was you got pretty good, you got pretty tough in those kinds of pressure testing situations. And I really support that. I think that's kind of the right way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I'm kind of interested in, I find with a lot of modern karate, there's a lot of people who seem to think it's more a mental thing rather than a physical thing. So they in their heads about techniques, but their bodies actually can't do anything.
I totally agree. And I totally think that's absolutely upside down wrong. Mm-hmm. It's mind-body combination. And just like me talking about Sensei finding a way to push you past what your limits were. Well, ultimately, it's your brain that helps you get past that limit. But your body has to be pushed there before your brain's going to open up and say, okay, let's go there. I think the physical aspects are absolutely critical to that. And the people who want to sit around and do math about what their kata is like, or, however they approach that, I think they're missing a lot, But modern karate's gone off the rails in a lot of different areas as far as I'm concerned. Now, I'm frankly to the point where, I may test this with my own students here coming up fairly soon. I'm at a point where I'd like to go back to what I experienced at the Hong Sing Sporting Academy in Manila when I trained in Choi Li Foot Kung Fu there. There were no belts. Everybody wore a black sash, which meant nothing except everybody wore a black sash. And how they would express it is they pointed to a guy and said, oh, he's a 5-year man. You look over here, oh, he's a 15-year man. And you could tell, because he was really good. And so it was all a function of their time. How long have they been training? No rank at all. And I think the whole concept of adding rank to this is just, well, let's put it this way. The next time I meet a 8-year-old Nidon, I'm probably going to start pulling my hair out. Because there's plenty of them out there. And to me, that's just silly. It's just absolutely silly.
Yeah, the problem with rank is that normally it should be based on how good you are, but people circumvent that system by like politics, and all of a sudden you have like someone who does something for the dojo and all of a sudden is a sandan or something ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I was just watching a video that someone shared on Facebook the other day. And it was an interview with Toguchi in his later years. And they said, well, what rank did Miyagi give you? He said, he didn't give anyone any rank. Miyagi didn't believe in rank. So we all did that after he passed away. I was like, you should have stuck with what Miyagi was doing. I think you might have been better overall.
One thing I'm kind of interested in is the, and I think another problem with a lot of modern karate people is the lack of hojo undo or like preparatory exercises and chishi and makiwara. That seems to be all dropped, but you seem to keep it.
I think you have to just be around the right dojos. I mean, I'm big on that stuff. I love it, and my students are getting involved in it early. Um, in addition to teaching karate and being involved in karate for now 53 years, as part of my preparation for becoming a retiree, since I love gyms and love training and so forth, I went and got certified as a personal trainer, and then subsequently got certified as a seniors personal trainer, and then as a sports nutritionist. So I have a background somewhat beyond just martial arts. And the benefits of doing resistance training for the human body and mind are just amazing. I live in a senior community. I teach seniors how to use weights and machines and so forth. And for women particularly, resistance training will add bone mass. And women are at great risk of losing bone mass, getting osteopenia, osteoporosis. And then if they have a fall, they break a hip, and then their life is pretty much over. And so by just doing resistance training, you can turn that around. You can actually reverse that. They've also found that resistance training reduces cholesterol. And there's all kinds of benefits to the human body that come from resisting more gravity than is there normally. And so I think the Okinawas were really onto something early when they invented Chi-Ishi and Sanshingame, Kongo-kin, and all these ways of resisting gravity using these interesting implements. The thing that they were way ahead of the power curve on, if you look at the history of weight training in America, it used to be, well, let's isolate this muscle, right? I want to work this bicep. So I'm going to isolate it by just curling. And I don't want to use any other part of my body. You can even sit down at a preacher curl, put the back of your arms on the pad so that you can't use any other part of your body as you're, making that part of your body get strong, right? The Hojo Undo, Kigo Undo techniques, like in doing Chi-Ishi, you're using everything from your toes up when you're doing Chi-Ishi. Using your toes, your ankles, your calves, your thighs, your hammies, your hips, your abs, your chest. Everything gets incorporated and is specific to throwing a punch. So what's happened in Western weight training over a period of time is they're now discovering that doing what they refer to as multiplanar exercises is superior to just isolating that muscle. And so you see all kinds of exercise programs coming out now that involve that sort of activity. Kettlebells is an example. Mm-hmm. Right? So I just think that the Okinawans were way ahead of the power curve on that. And to have these wonderful tools there, wonderful instruction available on how to use them, and to let them gather dust in the corner is just a mistake. It's just truly a mistake.
So do you recommend a combination of Western and Eastern, or do you just, if you recommend something, would it be just the Okinawan weights, or?
Well, the Okinawan training, again, this is like that multiplanar thing, right? In addition to the resistance, there's actually a skill being imparted. You with me? Mm-hmm. So it's not just curl the bar, it's learn the skill and the balance and all that other sort of thing. So I put that like at the top of the list, but 3 days a week, I'm in the gym doing weight training, and I have been for years. I just consider that more Hojo Undo. It's not traditional Hojo Undo, but it's supplemental training. I'm making my body stronger, but I still like to do my Chi-Ishi. I still like to do the Nigirigame. I don't have a Kongo-kin currently, but I'm trying to figure out how I can get one made. Kongo-kin, by the way, taught me how to do footwork properly.
Because you have to be able to do it, move it around.
Yeah, exactly. It was at one of our early gashukus, which we did out in the woods. And since they showed up with Kongo-kin, we had a 2-person exercise. I push it to you, it leans over, and then you push it back to me. Excuse me. Then when I got it, I stand it up. My left foot goes to the right side of the Kongo-kin, and then I spin my body, come back into Zenkutsudachi, and push it to you. And we go back and forth like that. But when you start to spin that Kongo-kin, it spins you. And so you learn to make that turn very quickly. And then once you have that experience, you go, I can do that without the Congo Ken. So now you can get your footwork going much, much better because of that experience of using the Congo Ken and how the torque of it makes you move. So I personally love the Congo Ken. And of course, I like all of it. Chishi is probably my favorite because of the balancing aspects of it. You got to hold that thing in balance. But they're all excellent tools. And combining that with my experience as a Western personal trainer, I just say it's wonderful stuff, and we should be doing it all the time.
I find that it's quite easy to recover from too. Like if I do chi, if I lift weights, then I can be fried from that for a while. But with traditional implements, I find that I can do them every day if I wanted to.
Yeah, one of the reasons for that is because you are using your whole body. You're not like, if I do a lot of bench press, kind of a joke in the household, because if I let my wife know that I've done a lot of bench press, the next day she's going, "How's that feel?" Like, "Oh, good." Just, you know, you don't get that with the Shigishi or Congo Ken because you're using your whole body. And so you're exactly right in your understanding of that.
So do you do that kind of stuff in your classes, or are you more into teaching and then having people do that on their own, or?
No, I actually, and they have to get to a certain level. Both, I've got children as well as young adults and adults. So I don't let the kids do the chi-shi because they're too small. Their bones aren't formed properly yet.
Mm-hmm.
When someone gets about 16, 17, I'll start letting them do the chi-shi. And we'll do that in class. And I frequently do exactly what Sensei Chinen used to do. We'd warm up as a class. We'd work through standing basics as a class, maybe moving basics as a class, maybe some kata. And then at some point he would say, white belts go over here, you do X, green belts over here, you do Y. And he would sort of go from group to group to group and work with each group for 10, 15 minutes, give them homework, go to the next group, work with them, so keep them all busy doing other things. So when I do that with my green belts who are old enough, I have one green belt who's a tiny little girl. I think she weighs less than some of the chi-shi. Excuse me. But I'll line them up and we'll work through chi-shi together. And excuse me, nigirigami exercises and that sort of thing. I don't have a Makawara at my dojo because my dojo is a room given to us by the city.
Mm-hmm.
And I have no place to put one, and they won't let me start drilling holes in the concrete slab. But I have one in my backyard, and I invite students to come over, and we'll spend a Saturday afternoon punching the Makawara. So they learn how to do that. I use a pad. I have them do some of the same Makawara drills using the pad that I would have them do on the Makawara. I was having a discussion just today on Facebook with someone. Makawara is way more than just a way to make your knuckles big.
Mm-hmm.
In my view, if you're starting to bust up your knuckles and get really big, huge, swollen knuckles, you're doing it wrong. That's not its purpose. You can do that if you choose to. Higo Sensei has made that his life in the last 15 to 20 years. But it's not necessary to win a fight to have your knuckles be really big.
I think I read that actually this morning.
Did you? Okay.
Your post about that.
Yeah. You do footwork, you do timing, you do distancing, you do all kinds of things that support your fighting using the Makawara as a nice target. And yes, it helps make sure your framework is right. If you hit the Makawara and your frame isn't right, you're going to collapse. You'll come off balance. You won't be able to deliver the power into the board. So it's way more than just making big knuckles. There's a whole world of stuff that Makawara does for you.
I always explain it as it's sort of like getting cauliflower ears for a wrestler. It's not going to help you
Yes.
wrestle. It's a byproduct of the actual training rather than the purpose of it.
Yes. I just read something interesting about that. Apparently there's a trend going on in some urban areas of young guys who want to look tough going out and getting their ears cauliflowered even though they've never wrestled. So they go to the bar and people think they're tough.
I've seen actually online how to do it.
There's certain insanity to all that kind of stuff.
And the Makiwara has got that sort of I personally don't agree with the way people sort of bash their hands up on it, but
Yeah,
that's just the way I've been taught, though. So
yeah. Well, I used to do um, for a long time lots and lots of koteki tai. You get a partner and you beat each other's forearms to death, and 4 or 5 different ways of attacking the forearms, shins, ribs, abs, and so forth. And you can literally make those body parts very, very, very hard, very strong, and almost you could break it maybe with a big iron bar or something, but an arm or a leg is not going to do that. If someone throws a hard punch at you and you block it, likelihood, unless they've done the same kind of training, likelihood is they're going to think you've broken their arm. They don't want to play it. Same if they throw a kick. If they haven't trained their shins and you hit that shin nice and hard, pretty much it's over because you get so well conditioned to that. But none of that is visible. You don't have calluses all over your arms or shins or anything. You just look like a guy with arms, right? But it becomes a very formidable weapon if you get that kind of toughness in your body parts.
yeah, I've I've got a similar background to you, and we do all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah.
Uh, I'd like to go back to Chinen Sensei a bit. Before we started recording, you'd mentioned that you'd helped him write a book before he
Yes.
passed, or
Yeah, some years ago, after one of our events, I was getting ready to leave, and Sensei came up and said, Ed Sumner, I have a favor to ask. I said, sure, Sensei, what is it? He said, I want you to be the editor of my book. Well, this book had been underway since 1970 something. And people ahead of me had done a fair amount of work in terms of capturing photographs, what it was he wanted to go in it and so forth. And for a combination of reasons, in part, he started becoming very, very popular for doing seminars all over the world. Sometimes he'd be gone for 6 months at a time. And one of the fellows that he had recruited to do some of this work before got very ill, couldn't train anymore, and ultimately passed on before the book was able to be published. And so the book had been dormant for quite a long time. And when they tried to do it before, there was no such thing as computer graphics. There was no digital photography, none of that sort of stuff. Well, I had been in the publishing industry as part of my career, and I think he chose me for that reason, plus the fact that I was a recovering English major. So he asked me if I would be his editor, and of course I couldn't say no. So of course he'd say, I'll be your editor. So I started assembling all these parts and pieces from all over. I have a friend in the Bay Area, which is where I lived at the time, who worked for me at 2 different organizations as one of my graphic designers. And he's quite good. And so we started the process of what is referred to as book building, which is assembling the photographs, the words, putting it all together. And this was another one of those how Sensei would teach things. He wouldn't just say, well, here it is, here's the answer, memorize that. He would send you off to learn something, to figure something out. And just as an example, he said, okay, we would have a Sunday morning telephone conference every Sunday morning at 7 o'clock. And every couple of months, I'd fly to Spokane and sit with him and work through stuff. And every now and then, he'd come down and do a seminar for my students, and we'd work through stuff. And so we were kind of in touch like that for 7 years, ultimately, before he passed on. But he would, in our conversation, he'd say, okay, and he never called me Ed, it was Ed Sumner. Ed Sumner, yes, Sensei. I want you to learn everything you can about the Noro cult in Okinawa. Okay, Sensei, I've never heard of it before. I have no idea where to start, but okay, I'll do that. So I dove into the Noro cult, and I found all this interesting stuff out about the Noro cult. And I wrote it all up for him. There's a young lady in Spokane who's one of his senior students, also a Nanadan, who she also was the person who gave Sensei a massive amount of care as he was in his last years and needed to go through dialysis and all that sort of stuff. If it hadn't been for Linda, we'd have lost him years earlier. She really was his nurse for quite a long time. But I would send her an email with the document in it. She'd print it, take it to him when she was getting ready to take him to dialysis. And he'd, make notes, change this, fix this, kind of back and forth. And then she'd send that back to me. And pardon me just a second. And I'd make corrections, and then we'd talk about it again the following Sunday. So it was kind of a long, laborious process. So we'll learn about the Noro. So I learned about the Noro. I sent him a report on the Noro. He said, yep, you've got that right. He said, now learn about how the first king show kept the guys who used to be kings in their own tiny little place in line. So we'll go learn about that. And I want you to study about the island where the Noros had their headquarters. Okay, did a report on that. He says, okay, now I want you to figure out which province was the closest to that island. Okay, well, it was the Chinen province. And what all these dots put together led to was the Chinen leader of that province started developing Chinen Yamani Ryu Kobudo, because his job from the shogun was to protect the Noro as they traveled from the island to the palace. That was his job. And that's where Yamani Kobudo came from. Yamani Chinen Kobudo. So it would be like these little discoveries along the way, and then I go, aha! So that was how we processed the book, was these little, he'd give me assignments, I'd write it, send it to him, he'd fix it, I'd fix it the way he wanted it done. So would it be fair to say that I wrote every word in the book? Yes. Would it also be fair to say Sensei wrote every word in the book? Yes, because he's telling me how he wanted it to be, where he wanted it. I mean, it was I want a period here. I want, very, very clear and careful about how he wanted all the expressions of that done. And so it was very collaborative, and all I can really tell you is one of the other seniors, another of the Nanodons, said to me one time, Ed, thank you so much for the work you've done on this book. I said, you don't need to thank me, because the work has been the payment. It's just been a wonderful experience to go through this process with Sensei and develop this book. It was just a life experience I could never have hoped for. It was absolutely a wonderful time, wonderful experience.
So the contents of the book is more biographical than technical, or
it's both.
Okay.
It has history. It's like, how did karate come to be in Okinawa? And what did the Okinawans do with it when they got it? And why was it important to them? So there's a fair amount of history. A lot of technical. All of the katas are represented step by step by step. What you're doing with the lines underneath saying what you should do and how to move your arms, that sort of thing. There's also a little feet underneath each picture saying where the feet are going, how are they moving, and so forth. If you have an opportunity to see a copy of the book and look closely, you'll find that the left foot only has 4 toes represented, because since they did not have a small toe on that foot, so we actually put that in the book that way. But so in addition to the technical stuff, there was also personal stuff, like how he grew up, what Okinawa was like at the time. Lots of stories like that. Some of them pretty touching, and some of them you kind of go, well, that explains a lot. If you knew Sensei, I mean, it's like you read the story and go, whoa, I didn't know that, but that explains a lot, But the disciplinarian that he was, just an intense disciplinarian.
Is the book available on Amazon, or will be available on Amazon, or?
It is not yet. We're kind of here's where we went with it, just so you know. We had a publisher lined out, and we, mean the organization, did everything wrong to that poor publisher. We never made a deadline. We never got anything to him on time. It was just terrible. And I was feeling like horrible, because I was the one interacting with him the most. And he finally came to a point where he said, I can't keep proceeding with this. But he said, here's what you can do. Do this, do this, do this, do this. When you're all ready, I can try to market it for you. And that's ultimately what we did. Well, one of our seniors who took charge of the printing, because he used to own a print shop, he got quotes for printing it, got all that stuff arranged. And he actually went out of pocket to buy the first print run. And we wanted to sell enough of those books at full market value for him to get paid back.
Mm-hmm.
As I understand it, that has now happened. So now we're trying to touch back with the original publisher and say, look, we can ship the books wherever you want them. We don't mind you taking a slice of it because you're entitled to it. But let's try and get it into Amazon at this point. I don't know where that stands right at the moment. I've kind of, it's like I handed off the ball. Bob carried the last foot over the finish line to actually get it printed. So touchdown scored. I'm not worried about that anymore. It's like,
well, if it does come out before I publish this video, or even after I publish the video, I'll leave a link in the description so people, if they want to get it, they can get it.
Perfect. Yeah. I think people will enjoy it. Since they started training before Miyagi passed away, which was 1953. So his span of training in karate and what he saw during the development of karate was really quite a long time and quite a lot. He's a bit of a controversial figure in some areas because he was so hardcore. Training with him was not easy. It wasn't most of the time. There was really kind of two Sensei Chinins, early Sensei Chinin, and then older and sick Sensei Chinin. He developed diabetes and didn't know what it was. He just knew he didn't feel good. But being Sensei Chinin, he just kept training until he fell over and had to be taken to the emergency room where he was in a coma for a couple of days. And so he had undiagnosed, untreated diabetes for a long time. Cost him his kidneys, his eyesight was failing, cost him a leg. It was a really, really rough time.
Is it type 1 or type 2? Or
Type 2.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was never obese. I mean, I don't think he ever weighed more than 120 pounds. So I don't know if it's genetic. I have no idea, but that's what happened. And he was not the same as old, tired, and sick Sensei Chinin as he was as young, magnificent athlete Sensei Chinin. And I think that's pretty understandable in a way. But he chased a lot of good guys away because he was just so hard, so disciplined.
It's a common story I hear of really good teachers are usually quite difficult to deal with.
They set very high standards, and they hold themselves to those standards. I mean, I used to see some of the stuff Sensei would do when he was a young guy. What I thought was hard work, he was doing that 3 times, and pushing himself and just driving himself, just pretty amazing actually. Work ethic just almost unbelievable. And I work hard. I mean, I trained under him for a long time. If you trained with Sensei Chinin, you knew how to work hard because you were going to work hard if you were there. It wouldn't be uncommon. It would be 20 degrees outside, 40 degrees inside the dojo. And at the end of practice, there'd be a 3-foot wide puddle of sweat you were standing in, and your gi would be completely soaked. So yeah, we trained hard, but that's how you get good at anything. Another little dialogue I had on Facebook recently was, well, some people say they've trained for 4 years, but they train 2 days a week for an hour. That's not the same as someone who's trained for 4 years who trained 6 days a week for 4 hours. That's absolutely right. But there's another factor in there. At what level of intensity? If you show up at the dojo and you hang around for 4 hours and you're not really doing much, that's not the same as training for 4 hours. That's not sweating all over the place and bleeding occasionally. So intensity is another factor that has to be put into that model, I think.
The dojos I train at, we're not allowed to speak in the dojo because if you're talking, you're not training.
You're wasting time.
Yeah, exactly.
The only speaking we were allowed to do is Sensei would say, "Are you tired? No, Sensei. Are you strong? Yes, Sensei." That was it. Call and response. We could respond. That was about it.
So your dojo is in Arizona right now, or
yes, yeah?
Is it a public dojo or a private dojo, or?
It's actually through the city. The city of Buckeye puts it together for me. I show up and teach. I don't collect any money. I don't pay any rent, none of that. I just show up and teach. And I really like it that way. To me, karate's never been about the money. It's, for me, a labor of love. I love teaching. I love seeing the students get better. I feel like we had the discussion earlier about what a master is. Well, I've trained under some masters. Katsuyoshi Kine was clearly one of those guys. Morihei Higona, absolutely. Eiichi Miyasato, unquestionably. Teru Chinen, right there with him. And I know I'm not that. I was not gifted with athletic talent. I was gifted with really good work ethic and enough brains to figure stuff out. But I've never had the kind of level of talent that would put me in that spot where I could consider myself a master. So for a long time, I didn't really want to teach because I wasn't at that level. And I finally realized, A, I'm of an age where that probably doesn't matter so much. But B, Sensei gave me an enormous amount of stuff, right? How to do things, how to train other people to do things. He taught me a lot about how to teach. We used to have long conversations about how to teach. And I realized I was being very, very selfish to just keep that inside of me and not share it. So I said I would start teaching and sharing what I knew with other people. And I tell them right at the very beginning, if you think I'm some kind of master, no. I know a lot because Sensei gave me a lot of stuff, and I think I can help you get strong. But don't look to me to be beating up everybody who comes in the dojo. That's not what it's about. You know, I'm too old for that, and my titanium hips wouldn't like it much.
Were the hip replacements, were they from training or?
Well, which training?
Okay.
Basketball, soccer, karate for a lot of years, running marathons, all of that. I mean, it's like when in the Chinese torture, death by 1,000 cuts, which cut was fatal? You know, it's like, you know, I've done a lot of damage to them over the years, and it caught up with me. So.
Well, many people I interview are always having knee replacements or hip replacements. And
yeah. If you're going to do highly athletic endeavors at a high level for a length of time, you will have injuries you're going to have to deal with. That's just how it is. And I've said this many, many times. If a little fairy godmother came over with her wand and said, okay, I'll give you totally fresh hips and the shoulders and knees and be like you were 25 again, but you have to erase your memory of everything you learned along the way, I would not make the trade. Not in art, and no, I'm not going to do it. That's all that stuff has made me who I am. I like who I am, and no, I wouldn't make that trade.
So we're coming up on an hour. Or is there anything you'd like to finish off with, or?
Well, in one of the last conversations Sensei and I shared, we were talking about our dojo-kun, which has in it, continue your training with patience. Now, dojo-kun is essentially sayings that Miyagi's senior students remembered him saying to them while they were practicing. So at some point they sat and wrote them down and said, okay, we've got these things we remember him saying. And so we say that at the end of each practice. Dojo-kun, hitotsu, be humble and polite, you know, so forth. Well, one of those is continue your training with patience. And Sensei said, I think that's wrong. I said, oh? He says, you should be continue your training with enthusiasm. I thought, yeah, I think I like that better. Yeah. So to anyone watching this who's training, continue your training with enthusiasm.
Well, thank you. That's a great way to end it. Thank you for coming on the program.
It was my pleasure.